One thing I constantly see brought up when the discussion of G.I. Joe on film is brought up is that the films were failures and that the next one needs to be a major success. Now, I'm going to disagree with this because the films were a success, but let's talk about what the upcoming reboot needs to do to be a massive success. So when it comes to films like G.I. Joe and, let's say, Bumblebee, for example, a film I'm using as an example that didn't do as good in the box office as the previous films, but then the lucrative end of it when it came to action figures and toy sales really was the deciding factor in more Transformers. G.I. Joe is exactly the same. And over the last couple of years, especially with Hasbro producing the 6-inch figures, G.I. Joe figures have absolutely obliterated toy sales to the point where you see that it's a viable franchise. Now, when it comes to the previous two films, each one was produced on a $120 to $150 million budget, made over $350 million worldwide, and a major part of its success was DVD, Blu-ray, streaming, and action figures, which had an estimated profit margin that far surpassed what the film made in theaters by almost 3 times. So again, the narrative that nobody cares about G.I. Joe or wants to see it is, I think, kind of pointless and stupid. What I think needs to happen is that the G.I. Joe reboot has to position itself as a big summer blockbuster that knows exactly what it is, and that plays into exactly what it is. Now, let me just backtrack a second before somebody brings up Snake Eyes. That film was a huge circumstance of the world at the time and when they had to toss it out, and the marketing was pretty terrible. So, I don't want to talk about that film right here. Maybe that was considered a failure and probably is, but again, they're going to try again, so clearly not as big of a failure as most people think. Now, let's get back to what do they need to do to make the reboot a success? In my opinion, you lean into G.I. Joe. Like, don't hold back. I want to see Cobra Commander on Cobra Island. I want to see Destro being Destro. I want to see Serpentor literally taking snakes out of the side, whatever they are, literally stretching a snake out and tossing it into someone. Like, they need to be G.I. Joe. The same way that the one sequence from Bumblebee that was set on Cybertron convinced everybody, hey, we need to lean into the Transformer aspect of it, you need to do that with a G.I. Joe. Just imagine if you could recreate the opening of the classic G.I. Joe movie with the Statue of Liberty, but that's the third act of a G.I. Joe film in live action. That's what you need to lean into. I want to see that trailer and shake my head going, I can't believe that this is going to be on film. I always get the sense that with the first G.I. Joe film, they were chasing a trend, and you can tell with those suits and everything like that, and they kind of held back on what made G.I. Joe special, and I don't blame them, it's what was popular at the time. The second film, they leaned more into what G.I. Joe is, but there was damage that was already done, and we know that there was some troubled productions behind the scenes and reshoots that were very public, and it didn't really help. And a huge payday for The Rock probably didn't help either when it came to offsetting the costs. Snake Eyes, that was circumstantial, and I don't really want to talk about that because that film had its own uphill battle to try to sell itself, especially when it came to Snake Eyes as an actor and who was behind the mask. So I honestly think to make the new film successful, lean hardcore into the ridiculousness and make sure it's front and center. If you're going to put Baroness in there, we want Baroness the way she needs to be. You have to play into that. Do you want to put the Enforcer in there? Yeah, I want the Enforcer in there. You make him look exactly how he looks in that cartoon. Don't take any shortcuts, and make an event film where people need to show up because you're going to get some good actors in those roles and commit to it.